Hello and welcome to another 5-in-1 Mayaani Talks. I'm Mega of Mayaani Jewellery, and today we're diving into part 2 of my exploration of Southeast Asian jewelry traditions. Now, if you missed part 1, I've put a link for you below so you can take a little look. In part 1, I covered some of the jewelry traditions that exist across Southeast Asia. Today, I thought we'd take a closer look at the stories behind those traditions. Of course, the videos I create are not necessarily intended to have to be watched in order, but I welcome you to take a little look at part 1 because that might just help you familiarize with some of the jewelry traditions which exist across Southeast Asia, which I found particularly fascinating because being Indian, I know a lot about Indian jewelry traditions, but I haven't, for example, explored much when it comes to China, Japan, Indonesia, Vietnam, Thailand. There's so many regions within Southeast Asia that have their own beautiful, rich jewelry traditions. I have literally just scratched the surface in part 1, but you may find yourself intrigued by a couple of the ones that I've mentioned. Anyway, diving on into today. So let's begin with fact number 1. For women across Southeast Asia, their jewelry wardrobe is essentially a biography of their story. A woman across many parts of Southeast Asia, across many Southeast Asian jewelry traditions, will receive certain pieces at birth. Sometimes they're made for her, sometimes they're received pieces that haven't necessarily been made specifically for her, with her in mind, but not necessarily specifically for her, with paying attention to any particular material she should be wearing or motifs. Because as you will already potentially be aware, Southeast Asia has a lot of spirituality associated with what is then going into creating your pieces of jewelry. So, from a spiritual point of view, there'll be certain materials that women are encouraged to wear or not to wear, etc. But when it comes to receiving gifts at birth, they are received. You receive them at other points in your life as well, coming of age, when you get married, when you get engaged, when you become a mother, and all these moments of a woman's life are marked with gifts they receive, with gifts that are made for you potentially, with gifts that you've inherited from the women that came before you. And so essentially a woman's jewelry wardrobe, when it comes to Southeast Asian woman's jewelry wardrobe, her jewelry wardrobe is not just a collection of beautiful pieces she has acquired over her lifetime or accumulated over her lifetime. It's actually a beautiful way for her to very visually tell the story of her life. And when she's wearing these pieces, that is essentially what she's doing. She's telling you the story of her life. Now, if we have a little look at a couple of regions like China, for example, of course, in China, the Chinese brides typically wear a phoenix crown, and the phoenix crown of a Chinese bride is incredibly beautiful, ornate, and elaborate. It's actually one of the most ornate, elaborate pieces of adornment in the world, and it is layered with lots of symbolism which speaks to feminine power, fertility, as well as good fortune as well. Across Japan, a young Maiko who's in training to become a geisha, a young Maiko's kanzashi changes as she progresses through her training. And if you know the language, simply through looking at her kanzashi, you can tell what stage of her training she's at. So it's actually a form of language and communication which marks how she's progressing in her journey towards becoming a geisha. Across Indonesia and Bali, when a woman chooses her wedding ceremony jewelry, the jewelry to actually wear during her wedding ceremony, she doesn't just choose this herself. Priests are involved in the choosing of these pieces, and the priests are consulted because the spiritual meaning behind the pieces she's choosing is just as important, if not perhaps more important, than the beauty associated with those pieces. Of course, they end up being beautiful anyway, but essentially they're not chosen for their beauty. And in Vietnam, for example, across and including a couple of other smaller, lesser known minority communities, a young woman, when she comes of age, receives her most significant piece of jewelry, and that is typically a form of silver jewelry. And in the case of Vietnam and some of these smaller minority communities, the silver jewelry that is received by the woman is actually made by women in her family and contains motifs or illustrations or symbols and patterns that show you which community she's come from, and even so far as showing which village she's from as well. So you can see how across Southeast Asian jewelry traditions, a woman's jewelry wardrobe is not just an accumulation of vanity. It's not just an accumulation of pieces to display wealth or status. It is actually an accumulation of pieces which carry the story of her life and tell you the story of her life very visually. Fact number two, inherited jewels are thought across many regions of Southeast Asia to carry the spirit and energy of the people who came before. So, across Japanese traditions of katachi, I apologize for pronunciations, but I'm going to pronounce it this way. And across the Japanese tradition of katachi, objects that you receive carry the energy of not just the person who made the object, but every person who has touched the object along the way. So, every individual who has touched that object along the way, worn it, used it, had it in their home, their energy is what you inherit alongside this actual physical object. So, in a sense, it's more powerful and important to look at the energy that you're inheriting with the piece than it is the actual object. Now, of course, many people receive and inherit these pieces into and welcome them into their lives from a sense of duty, from a sense of loyalty to tradition. But if you start to consider that what you're actually inviting into your life is also all the energies that are associated with this object now, then you may want to question what energies you're actually allowing in, because there may very well be a person or two along the way in the story of that piece whose energy you do not necessarily wish to welcome into your life. So it's important to think about. When it came to Chinese jade pieces, or comes to Chinese jade pieces, again, they are passed down from generation to generation, and they're thought to grow more powerful as they go from one generation to the next, because essentially they're accumulating along the way not just stories of the people whose hands they have passed through and whose lives they've been worn in. They're actually bringing and carrying on with them the energies of all those people too. So an ancestral piece, when you receive it, when it comes to a jade piece, you're not just receiving a gift here, you're inheriting a responsibility as well. Across Southeast Asian Jewelry traditions, when it comes to dowry, the gold dowry, the gold that you receive for your dowry, your wedding jewelry, it's not just wealth. It is actually bigger than that. It's family stories. So the pieces of gold that you have accumulated within a family across generations, if there's a particular piece that has been passed across generations of your family, a piece of gold, for example, jewelry that's been passed across generations from you through your family. It's not just a piece of gold jewelry that you're passing on through your family lineage. What you're passing on is a specific story, a specific moment in a particular person's life, a specific woman and her story, along with any of the beautiful moments that are associated with that woman and her life, as well as any sorrowful or sacrificial moments in her life too. So you're not just passing on a piece of gold jewelry that's been inherited in terms of an object. You're actually passing on a whole lot more than that, consciously or unconsciously. When it comes to Korean norige, which is passed down from mother to daughter, sometimes for centuries, again, what you're accumulating here is a collection of stories as well as energies. And this is why I invite us to question, when it comes to our inherited pieces, what exactly we are inheriting. Because I feel the more consciously aware we become of what we're inheriting, the more we can look to decide or choose differently, perhaps. Fact number three, typically across Southeast Asian jewelry traditions, but the pieces were chosen with a very careful attention paid to the materials from which they're made rather than the price tag. So, materials that are used to create the pieces of jewelry have a higher importance across many Southeast Asian jewelry traditions than the actual price tag that's involved. For example, across many Southeast Asian hill communities, silver is actually preferred to gold. Silver is preferred to gold because silver is seen to be purifying and seen to be carrying greater protective energies than gold does. Jade, as we know in China, is revered and chosen and preferred because of the five virtues of Confucian philosophy that jade is thought to embody. Those virtues being humanity, justice, purity, wisdom, and courage. When it comes to red coral, again, this is a material that's chosen because it is thought to carry life force energy as well as have a lot of protective energies, and is thought to connect you to the living world too. So, red coral is not just a material choice because red coral looks pretty or because of its price point. It's chosen because of the meaning behind it, more so than its price tag or how beautiful it looks. Pearls in Chinese and Japanese traditions are typically favored because they're associated with wisdom that you gain through experiencing life. And of course, pearls take a while to be created. So, in a sense, they are gathering wisdom. They are a good way to embody and symbolize the wisdom that you gain through experience, through going through life. They're also thought to be associated with tears. They're thought to be associated with the moon and with mysteries of the feminine, feminine mysteries. The color red in Chinese tradition, that is typically favored and revered and chosen because the color red is thought to symbolize luck, life, celebration, as well as protection. And of course, in Chinese traditions and beliefs, there is a belief and culture and belief, sorry, there is a belief that there is a red invisible cord or string that ties souls together. And this red invisible cord is unbreakable and essentially means that these souls will find each other um, irrespective of their current time, place, or circumstance. They're destined to meet regardless of all of those things. And finally, the lotus and chrysanthemum motifs, which are typically seen across Buddhist and Taoist jewelry pieces. Those are particularly noteworthy because the lotus emerging from mud is seen as the most powerful, if not ultimate, symbol of spiritual transformation. So you can see how the materials are not chosen necessarily for price, they're chosen because of what they represent, what they stand for, what they're thought to embody. And the symbols, again, are not random. They're chosen because of what they're seen to represent and symbolize and embody again. Fact number 4. Now, across Asian jewelry traditions, there has always been a conversation that's been taking place. What do I mean? Well, the Silk Road, which we all know as the ancient trading route through which majority of trade took place in ancient times, thousands of years ago, that Silk Road, which went from China to the Mediterranean through Central and Southeast Asia, was not just a road across which materials, physical goods were actually traded, it was a road across which ideas were traded too. Across this Silk Road, through the interactions that took place between the different people from different backgrounds who were trading and traveling along this road, there was an exchange, a beautiful exchange of ideas taking place. And with this, we have seen a lot of the ideas kind of interplay with each other, which is why you can see similarities across many cultures and many traditions. So, for example, filigree techniques as well as granulation techniques, they travel across the Silk Road, and this is why you can see them across many different cultures. Many different cultures have added their own take to these techniques. Certain gemstones have also traveled along the Silk Road, and again, they have carried with them some of the reasons why they're worn, how they're worn, what they're worn for with them as well. They've passed that particular story on into the new cultures they've entered. We've also seen uh, symbols being communicated and exchanged in this way as well. So the use of symbols is something um, that has been exchanged through this Silk Road, and which is why we can see certain symbols repeating themselves across different cultures. Now, lapis lazuli is a beautiful example of this. Lapis lazuli from Afghanistan made its way into Chinese and Egyptian jewelry thousands of years ago because of the Silk Road. Carnelian and agate beads from the Indian subcontinent found their way across Central Asia and the Middle East as well, again, because of the Silk Road. So Asian jewelry traditions were never isolated from each other. Why is this important to mention? Because sometimes we can be led to believe there is such a thing as a pure tradition or a pure culture, a culture that is sealed off, that's been preserved, unadulterated from by any other culture. No such thing exists. It's a myth. There is no such thing as a pure culture or pure tradition because our traditions and cultures have always evolved for thousands of years because of the conversations and the beautiful exchanges of ideas that we have had along routes like the Silk Trading Road and route. So, this whole idea that our cultures are separate, our traditions are separate, this whole separating off of cultures and traditions is more of a modern idea and perhaps one that we have developed for convenience sake, perhaps so that we can stand out and be different from each other. I'm not really sure why, but essentially, there's no such thing as a pure, isolated culture or tradition. Fact number 5. majority of the threshold moments in a woman's life in particular, but across men's lives as well, where they've received jewelry, are marked through silver and gold. Now, at birth, for example, in Southeast Asia, across many parts, babies are given silver bangles. In China, it's jade pendants that they receive. Across Buddhist cultures, it's protective amulets they'll be bestowed. Either way, the object that a baby is given at birth is an object chosen because it's thought to carry protective energies and powers, as well as thought to be able to offer blessings to that new life that's been welcomed as well. Now, coming of age is another moment that is marked quite heavily with jewelry, particularly for young women across many Southeast Asian traditions and cultures, but not just Southeast Asia. It's important to add, but as I'm focusing on Southeast Asia today, that's what I'll mention. And for young women, this would be a time when they're coming of age that they receive their most significant piece of silver or gold jewelry. And the whole purpose of receiving this significant piece is to publicly and very formally announce that this young woman has now taken the next step. She has transitioned. She has moved from the phase of her life that was her young girlhood through to now womanhood. Um, Marriage and engagement were other moments, I should say, because it's a very alive tradition, are other moments in a woman's life which are marked heavily with jewelry in Southeast Asian traditions. So this is probably when you get engaged and when you get married, the most marked moment of a woman's life when it comes to jewelry. It is the time of your life when you receive the most amount of gold and silver jewelry in particular. And there are many reasons for this. It's not just a vulgar display of wealth, although it can be that too in some families. There is not just this idea that you're displaying your wealth, or rather your families are displaying their wealth through how much of this jewelry they give to you when you get engaged and married. There's also the idea that when you're gifted and when you receive these pieces of jewelry from your parents, or when you get married and engaged, and from your in-laws, the parents who are going to become your parents through marriage, that they're giving you identity too. So when you wear those pieces, you are connected with the identity of the people who gave you those pieces and the family line from which those pieces came as well. So that's one of the reasons why a lot of jewelry is gifted to you when you get married and engaged. Another reason is across Southeast Asian traditions, across many of the traditions, your wedding jewelry and engagement jewelry is seen as a way to declare new alliances. It's a way to very visibly show the new bond that has been formed between your two families, between your family and the family into which you are now marrying, as well as a blessing. This jewelry is also seen as a way for both sides of the family, your family and the family you're marrying into, to offer blessings to the lineage that you're going to birth. Because, of course, there is a very big expectation across Southeast Asian families and in the Southeast Asian cultures for you to, once married, procreate. So, yes, but essentially, it's this jewelry that you're receiving when you're getting engaged and married is seen to be a sort of blessing towards that lineage. So every major moment in your life, as a woman in particular, in Southeast Asia, Asian Jewish traditions across Southeast Asia, is marked in some way with a piece of jewelry. So the jewelry does so much more than just adorn you and beautify you. It is actually a beautiful way to share. It's a visible record. It's a permanent physical record in a way of who you are, of who came before you, of all the thresholds that you've crossed in your life, all the blessings you've carried. But it's also a record of other things too, because records don't just hold one story. And this is where I'd like us to leave this wonderful video, to leave with the thought of what our jewelry actually means. Because as we're becoming more consciously aware, as we're calling into question, so many of us are becoming more aware consciously and therefore calling into question what it is we are inheriting and what it is we're passing on. As we're doing this, I think it's important for us to ask ourselves the honest question of what does my jewelry mean? Because the pieces of jewelry, particularly those you've inherited, do not just carry this idea of you've received this piece of jewelry, it's now your responsibility to wear it, to be loyal to it, and pass it on loyally in the name of tradition. We are calling ourselves and we are finding ourselves questioning more and more what it is pieces that we're inheriting, including behaviors, not just pieces of jewelry we're inheriting. We're calling into question many of the things we've inherited and whether they're things we wish to pass on. And jewelry is one of those areas too, where I invite us to actually question when we're inheriting pieces and when we're looking to pass on pieces, to question what it is we're actually inheriting and what it is we're actually passing on, and whether some of the stories that we are inheriting with those pieces, especially bearing in mind that pieces accumulate stories and energies over time, whether those are actually stories and energies we actually want to pass on. Because some stories are beautiful, they are loved, and you want to, with positive intention, because they are so positive and uplifting, you want to pass them on to the next generation. But other stories are perhaps more negative, perhaps they're more destructive potentially, whether it's the energies or the stories that that piece has passed, through the people that piece has passed through. You may wish to undo some of those. So in those cases, there is a call for us to perhaps give thanks, because without that particular chapter in the life of this piece that we've received in our life story, our family life story, we would not be here where we are today. But at the same time, those are not stories or energies we wish to communicate and pass on. So we give thanks to them and we learn how to let them consciously fade away as well. So I welcome you to call into question the pieces that you have in your wardrobe, whether you've inherited pieces already, or whether you're going to inherit pieces, or whether you yourself are looking to invest in pieces that you wish to go on to pass on for others to inherit it, for future generations to inherit. Question: what does your jewelry mean? And is there a possibility that some of those energies and stories associated with the pieces that you have inherited, or with the pieces that you're looking to pass on, is there um, a need for us to call into question some of those stories and energies? And could it be possible that some of those stories and energies are actually better left um, into history, basically, not passed on anymore, not carried forward any longer? And I think this is also a good moment to consider materials, because there are certain materials from which heirloom pieces can be created, which give the flexibility for future generations, including our present generation. If we're fortunate enough to have these materials in our inherited pieces, they provide us the flexibility to rework the inherited pieces. So that if and when we do start to call into question what it is we're passing on, if we decide what we're passing on is not something we feel we can actually pass on, without betraying some part of ourselves, without feeling like we're doing a disservice to the future generation in some sense, then we can pass on an heirloom piece in a way that allows us to reframe or reshape that. So, what I'm saying here is ultimately, when it comes to choosing materials for heirloom pieces, perhaps this is a call for us to be more conscious of the materials we choose and how easy it is for those materials to be reworked into a slightly new piece, should at any point anyone in our lineage decide that they want to carry on the energies and positive stories that that piece that they've inherited has carried into their lives. But they want to free it and detach it from any negative stories and negative energies it may have acquired along the way. So by preserving the material, you essentially can do that. You can contain the essence of your lineage, the power of your family, without having to pass on the negative energies, by reshaping those materials into a new piece. So it no longer looks like the exact piece that perhaps was present at the time when those stories were created, which we no longer want to be associated with, or at the time when the energies of the person whose energies we have decided actually we do not wish to pass those forward. We're of course very alive and active. I'd love to know what your thoughts are on today's video. Of course, if you enjoyed today's video, I'm going to say it. Please do hit the like button. Of course, you're welcome to subscribe. And if you enjoy this content, hitting the notification bell will tell you when my next video is out. But for now, remember, because your jewelry should always be more than just an afterthought, and I will be back again soon. Bye for now.